Okay, the final myth this week is there is a perfect diet. No, there's not. Don't be crazy. Look around you. Do you see anyone the same as you? Having one particular perfect diet is the same as saying we're all the same, we all look the same, we've all got the same physiology. That's absolute nonsense. We need to find our own physiology and feed ourselves according to that. When a new client walks into my clinic room, the first thing I want to know is, where are they from? In my adopted country of South Africa, it's incredibly multi-ethnic. So I want to know, are they South African, i.e. African? Do they have European origin? It could be British, it could be Dutch, it could be French. What are their ethnic origins? So I see a lot of Indian people, for example. So they might be thoroughly South African in terms of where they grew up, but their line of lineage is Indian. I will treat them differently to if their line of lineage was Scottish. Each ethnic origin has a big part to play in what foods we select to eat on a daily, regular basis. To take an extreme point, let's consider an Indian and an Eskimo. Now, India is the country with the highest vegetarian/vegan diet in the world. Eskimos, what do they eat? Whale blubber and fish and seals and so on. So certainly in the winter they don't get much vegetable matter. What would happen if you put an Eskimo on a diet of lentils and rice? And what would happen if you take an ethnic Indian and put them on a diet of whale blubber? Do you think their health's going to be particularly good? No. But ironically, I'm seeing Indians in South Africa doing the Banting diet, the high-fat, low-carb diet, and wondering why their cholesterol's going sky high and they're having problems with blood sugar and triglyceride levels and their cardiologist is concerned. You need to just think of the basics. I've done a lot of genetic testing for the last 5 years because the concept of individuality fascinates me. I was working in an individual way before even I knew about genetic testing. So theoretically, if somebody was to do well on a, let's say, high carb, low fat diet, you would see it in their genetics. This particular report example shows that the person in question struggles to metabolize fats, but they're fine with carbs. But if somebody thrived on a high fat, low carb diet, their genetic results should look something like this. But in 5 years, how many times have I actually seen these dietary extremes in genetic reports? A big fat zero. I actually got these images by cutting and pasting. But some people do well on a high-fat, restrictive, low-carb diet and vice versa. They do exist. But as Malcolm Gladwell would say, they're outliers. Outliers is actually a scientific term saying that people who lie outside the scientific kind of normal or average limits. My client genetic reports are more likely to look like one of these ones. So carb or fat or dietary selection is not as simple as one way or that. Occasionally it is. But for example, the third report I just showed you, for that particular person, I needed to be careful with his or her saturated fat and carbohydrates. So both showed up as a moderate issue. So we need to limit saturated fats to an extent and certainly limit sugars and refined carbohydrates. So both were a concern. So that's a very individualized way of working with somebody. And this last scenario is surprisingly very common. We need to be focused on getting rid of all the poor quality carbs out of a diet and limiting the saturated fat and absolutely eliminating the trans fats in a diet. I mentioned certain ethnic origins a little while ago, and a fascinating study in genetics is called the Japanese study, where they took 164 overweight men, and for 2 years they were restricted to a 1,600 calorie diet, and they had to exercise for 1 hour every day. Now imagine the average South African guy doing that. How much food and how much exercise? Hey, they would last a week. But culturally in Japan they could do it because people are very honourable, and if they say they'll do something, they'll carry it through. Now the results were quite fascinating because there were like 4 different groupings that came out from that with very variable results. The first one was weight loss maintenance, which was a gradual weight loss over the trial. Second one was rebound, so weight loss over 6 months, and then they slowly regained the weight. Then there was a slow weight loss, so they lost weight but more slowly than the first 2 groups. And then lastly there was weight loss resistant, so they had no significant weight loss during the 2-year period, but yet they completed the trial. Quite amazing. Interestingly, out of the men who struggled to lose weight, many of them had a variant on the adrenaline gene, or one of the adrenaline genes, which has been shown to actually do better with a low-carb diet. But they were following a standard low-fat diet. So here's an example of actually knowing their genetics up front, you could actually change the way that they're eating and get different results. So even within cultures and within ethnic origins, there are big variations on how you respond to food. So with a bit of practice, either through genetic testing or just trial and error, you can actually figure out where you personally lie on this black-white spectrum that I've drawn together.